Smell that? Victory. Finally, the Beast Snagga boss is done. Welcome to part 2. Man, this is the capstone for this unit entry. You can see behind me, he's finally attached. It felt so good. This project has been a little bit drawn out, but by design, I wanted to share a lot of it on Twitch, so I started it in September of 2023, and I'm just now finally completing it. It's not usually how I work, but every piece is an experiment, and I guess it was nice to do some things a little differently. We have much to discuss, but first, let's get into the painting.
Look at this colorful fella. Welcome to round 2. Hey, I'm alive. I don't have COVID anymore. Let's paint. So we've got some things to finish up. First of all, over a base-coated mixture of scrag brown and black, I will now be bringing a second mixture of scrag brown and black, but this time there is less black. You can see the brightness being laid in place. I want to make sure to tenderly paint every hair. Again, this guy is a lot of detail. Very busy model, but I think it suits his orky nature. It's pretty simple. All of these hairs are very prominent, opposed to just a mass of matted fur like you see with certain wolf pelts. I'm going to give it an all-over highlight with this color, but as with everything else, we're trying to add more dimension and such, a little more dramatic lighting. So we'll start to pull things into certain tighter areas, but for now, before we start doing those pulls, just a general highlighting. So now the shaping can begin. And the texture, it's funny, you see me like sweeping backwards. The texture is so deep on this fur. But now it's time to start pulling out some of that dimension, to add some of the extra, make things look a little more dramatic. So generally, as I'm seeing it, you have a larger portion right here that lays across his shoulder pad. So there, you can see me. I'm circling and I'm painting the area. You can see where I'm concentrating these highlights, starting to grow into some soft spotlights. This color will still need to be applied in a broader sense, just a little bit more or less, just a little bit less than the previous pass, and you can see it's taking me a few layers to really get things going. I've returned to my proper brush strokes, sweeping towards where I'd like the color to deposit on the tips of this fur. But yeah, here you've got kind of this cowlick coming up in front of the squiggly buddy. This is still going to get highlighted, but a little bit less, not quite as broad, so the roots are starting to take on a little bit more of a shadow. And over here, this area is pretty simple, just the gentle escalation. Pull things just like so. Again, it's a pretty broad highlighting approach. Let me flip the man. And this, as I'm examining this and painting it, I can see that this follows the current of this cowlick over here. It's turned back just a little bit, but yeah, this flat drop off right here, I really want to make sure that I get that chiseled in place. So on with the chiseling. You can see how I'm working this up and just many gradual layers to produce that saturation. It's pretty easy. I'm using the side of the brush. It's much like an edge highlight, just applying a gentle amount of pressure, and thanks to the depth on the sculpt, those raised areas are going to be catching the paint, so I can get away with a little over sweeping like so to just pick out the points. Yeah, that's pretty much the philosophy and stroking going on to this step. So let me complete that and we'll see exactly what it looks like. Now things are getting interesting. It's time for that gradual lift up. What I have on my brush is still Scrag Brown, but this time I've brought a slight amount of Barren Dune into that. So I've got a mixture. It's just a light, it's an ivory, but a lot more yellow mixed into it. It's a good universal highlight tone, but you can see here, just sharpening the area of focus, making sure that this spot is, as previously discussed, is being brought up, lightened, but I want to maintain, that kind of separation between the over rolling shoulder pelt versus the cowlick, as I've been describing it. So you see my highlights on the cowlick, the more straight up facing hairs, a lot more minuscule. Whereas down here, I'm applying a much more broad highlight area. It's more exposed to the light. And I had already been working ahead on this side to just, produce, because of the many layers, I wanted you to really see the difference in brightness. And, it's a very gradual process. I'm trying to capture the notable pieces of the painting process, demonstration of learning. So you can see as the saturation grows, you can see what kind of progression this is growing into. And like every battle plan, sometimes it does not last past the first turn. I'm laying the paint down, I'm comparing the areas, and I wasn't seeing enough of that effect. So my decision is to bring the Scrag Brown further down into the shadows in this more forward-facing lumpy hump. That's better. Now things are starting to separate themselves in a very subtle way, bringing some of that spotlighting into place. Let me continue sharpening up, and then we will see what comes next. Voracious and vibrant. Vibracious. Vibrant. Okay, so you can see what I'm doing here. I've just added a little bit of white into that previous mixture. So we got a little three-way going on between Bloodstone, Barren Dune, and some pure white. Picking out some very specific areas, mainly tending to the points, but there are certain bends in the fur that would lead the light to be picking up, about halfway through, or some of these larger pieces of fur, you can see, that light would be accumulating right about there. And part of what's guiding me that is that spotlighting effect that I wanted to pull into place, keeping your kind of specular highlights in mind. Just throw down a little bit of that mixture like so. I want to be very careful to cap off every little tipping point. So to slice those along, and in some areas, a little blending. There's some pretty broad chunklets of fur. Yeah, I like where this is going. I think this will do for the final highlight. Let me get this pulled together. Look at that lovely pelt upon his back. The only thing left to do is take some Scrag Brown mixed with black and just sharpen and define some of those areas I was talking about. Got the lump, got the cowlick, got that bit of separation. Just generally making sure that I'm paying attention to all the shadows, just kind of go back through there with a darker tone. You can see me lining some of these pieces out. I say some. I'm so Midwestern. It's all. We speak in half steps. I am lining out all of the depths of shadows. You can see it has a smoothing effect, just using a diluted mixture, letting gravity do the work for me. It's a heavily textured area, so it's pretty easy to guide my brush into those creases. Not too bad. It's a pretty simple step here, so let me wrap it up, and we'll finish a little bit more of our war boss. Right, let's bring that hacking blade to life. So you can see it is tilted back in his hand ever so slightly, which is why I am creating the light, the pool of light right up here. There's some natural shadows playing across this. As always, say it with me. Listen to what the light is telling you. Just follow along with those soft shadows if I pay real close attention. And just to create a little bit of some visual interest, you always have the chance to, apply a little bit more of an animated take. I want the blade to be gleaming, a little reflective. Who's to say exactly what the light situation playing out around the sword is, but excuses aside, that's what's leading me to place a light shadow up on that curved tip. Shading these, I don't even know what the purpose of these are, but orcs. So that's the first pass. After giving that a moment to be sure that it is properly dry, coming back in, a mixture of gunmetal with some black added into it. Let's feather that out. With a slight remains on my brush, I'll add to this softer shadow up here. Just kind of gradually laying down the layers. And let's pull in yet another pass. I won't make you sit through all of these layers, but it's always just it's nice to prove that many thin layers create a smooth gradient. The more layers that I sweep in place, the smoother it will become, and I need to move about that gently. Very small amounts of paint so I can pull them out to a glaze-like consistency. I might work it up just a little bit more with the same approach, but you can see where it's going, and you can see the thinness of the paint being applied very gradually. Wash time. On the palette, I've combined dark tone with just a drop of Tree Ancient. The plan here is that I'd like to get an oily gunmetal sort of tone to my weaponry, so let's just sweep that wash into place. As always, remember to apply your washes with a little bit of direction in mind. You can see I'm pushing the wash towards the areas where I had already applied some paint to shade down. I'm pushing it into the recesses. I'll drag it over the entirety of the blade to maintain an even surface tension as it dries. But yeah, just like so, a simple wash. The important part is toning it out with that little bit of gun grease. Smooth operator. Next, I'm going to go in with some diluted Scrag Brown. Most likely lay this down in multiple passes. The idea is to lay down some diluted paint. It's going to dry a little thin, a little bit irregular, but that creates a certain roughness representative of rust. So you can see the first layer dried, and now I'll try to lay down an even smaller amount of that dilution. Just counting on things to kind of, just gonna let chaos take the wheel. Just add some dabs here and there. It's supposed to look irregular, just like the formation of rust. Get nice and rough-like. I don't want to go too heavy. I want a subtle and tasteful amount of rust. His weapon is medium maintained, but they are orcs after all, so their maintenance may not match human standards. To follow that up, I'll be going in with a highlight of shining silver to cap everything off. With this, I can add some extra scratches onto the blade, just pressing very lightly. See, I'm almost missing the surface. The lightest amount of pressure being applied will result in very narrow lines. To make sure they aren't all conforming in the same exact direction, but I'll just kind of go at things from this angle. I'm holding it comfortably, so we can pick everything up from this direction, as well as adding some scratches. I just rotate it in my hand slightly and pull some scratches in from a differing direction. I can, kind of almost stipple. I want to add a lot of kind of a rough, toothy edge. In my mind, he's been hacking through piles of power armor, and that's some tough stuff. But the orcs are tougher. After all, they do follow a false god emperor. So, I mean, how much is there to really depend on? The fifth chaos god? Okay, time to work up the reds. So, over a base coat of sanguine base and black, I will first be bringing up the sanguine base. And again, listen to what the light is telling you. I can see a slight reflection coming through right here. Of course, I know I want to over-embellish the dimensions on such a tiny model to give it a lifelike amount of contrast, but it's always helpful to see what the light is telling you if you're a little confused about where exactly it should be placed. Observation can be your best informant. So we'll be laying down layers of sanguine base, gradually building up to a brighter accumulation. And again, this upward facing angle is going to receive a lot more light than the downward facing areas. So blend accordingly. It's a very similar situation to these varying surfaces within the pelt. But of course, seeing is believing. I try to alliterate what I am doing in front of your eyes. So if my words fall short, follow the painted example. Let's kick it up a notch. Now things are becoming a little more interesting. It's much easier to see the brighter tone being brought into play. This is a mixture of Khador red and sanguine base. Just the previous layer being sanguine base. I just wanted to gradually start brightening things up with the addition of a brighter red. I'll probably need a little more water in there. Yeah, we'll have this tooth becoming just a little bit darker as it trails away on the top, only a little bit. So, yeah, you can see I'm just showing a small portion of the darker tones I was establishing. And also with this color, I can start bringing some edge highlights into play, starting to sharpen things. Yeah, this is where it starts to take off. I know the two coats interacting before, that sanguine base with black and sanguine base, a little more subtle, but it was necessary to establish things, bring in this brighter tone. I don't think I want it to go to a crazy bright red. I like to keep it somewhat muted, at least for now. I'm not sure if I'll bring orange into the mix as I go, but we will see. See if this, once I get up to the pure red, if that will be bright enough. But as I'm rambling, you can see the accumulation taking place, the gradual saturation finding its way home. It's a nice gradual build, founded on many thin layers, as many steps before. So yeah, let me just keep on cooking along on this one, and we'll jump back and see what's come from these layers, this next step up. And we are back, pulling in some of that pure Khador red base. Mamma mia, now things are really lighting up. Look at that lovely, luscious contrast. Just going in with very small amounts of paint, making sure to get my dramatic spectral highlights in there, aka just dramatic contrast in this case. But I've really enjoyed what spectral highlights teaches you. Keeping that in mind, I feel like it It helps me to more deeply analyze a surface. Spectral highlights would be the highlights of an object reflecting back at you when you're looking at it. Such as holding a marble in your hand, and as you rotate the marble around in your fingers, that little light on top of the marble, that bright reflective dot, it doesn't move because the light is bouncing off of the surface and back into your eyes. So as you rotate the marble, that spectral highlight does not move. It's thinking about the miniature in more of the photography angle. And I don't mean just painting it for a photo. I mean the way a photographer would be setting up their subject matter and directing the light. Of course, I want this to be, I don't want to turn the model around backwards and see total darkness. I'm highlighting it all over. But those specular highlights have really been something I've been keying in on and just enjoying the results. And of course, I'll be pulling my edge highlights into play, making sure to not completely cover the previous layer. Those edge highlights are also building and gradiating towards a certain brightest spot on the model. And not that I don't enjoy painting, but this is a part where it starts to become extra fun for me. Extra fun on top of already fun, because I can start to see the model shaping up, just getting closer to that light at the end of the tunnel. It's being brought more to life now that it has a good amount of rendering and volume to all the shapes. I'll keep cracking on, and you may have noticed that some other areas of the model have been brought up previously, and I'm trying to save myself a little time on the recording day, but leaving certain parts unpainted so I can capture all of the footage. Sometimes I stay up late at night, and I may not be the best at speaking, but my painting still remains true. My aim is true. So I'll keep cracking along, and we will jump back. Look at those spicy reds. All right, so this time I've brought some lava orange in combination with the Cador red base. And you can see, I'm highlighting in very, very tight areas. Mainly, this is an edge highlight color, but there are certain spots, like the plane across this shoulder shard where it will be used to create some blending. But you can see on these lower pieces and all these little knuckle guards, etc. I'm just going to be using this to throw in a very faint edge highlight. And yeah, I'm getting close to orange, but not completely breaking into orange. It's going to look like the orangest thing on this model because it is, but I assure you it's still in that fiery red area. I'll be pulling this around as usual, and it's getting a little redundant at this point. We know kind of the approach, the techniques at play, but just making sure to control your gradient. Do not completely cover up the previous layer. You don't want to be undoing your work. So I'm just kind of pulling the scope of focus a lot closer, just tending to those finer points. Gradual, as always. You can see how much mileage I'm getting out of a single brushload of paint as well. I'm just going, kind of giving everything a touch. Sorry, my guy's a little loose on the painting handle. Yeah, just giving everything a little touch, gradually increasing that saturation. And this edge right here, I can kind of pull things to a sharper corner. I don't want to, again, on the notion of not undoing the previous layers, you're not completely covering every red edge. You should be avoiding that. Just painting over what you've already done. You can see the effect it's having, getting that, all those dimensions locked in place. I will continue the locking of the dimensions and already come back, for yet another step in the right direction. Alright, looking spicy. You've seen this little bit before. This is in the last video, but I haven't included it in part 2. So, just got a little shred of some foam, and very sparingly, I just want to drop a few tapples in here and there to create some battle damage. Carefully, cautiously, because I already done that on the yellow parts of the armor. I would prefer to save this stage, do it all at once, but the kind of step-by-step nature of filming or recording takes that away from me. No problem. Just be careful. So let's lay down some small black portions, and if you want to use a brush, no issue either. Okay, not bad at all. The next step, unify everything with a wash. So what I have here on my thumbnail is crimson ink, just a nice deep red from FW, and I've mixed just a small amount of black into it and a small amount of red. What that gives me, I get the viscosity of the ink, but the opaque paints being mixed into this counteract that potential glossy coat. I've also diluted this with water, not just throwing, straight heavy mixture down. This is a very glaze-like consistency, just as all other washes. It's meant to be transparent and show through what lies beneath. So get that slid in place. It's going to smooth everything out. Mamma mia, I like it smooth. Yeah, buddy. Let's round it off. You can see I spared you the pain of watching me fill in those tiny black marks, or I could fit it. I dropped a little silver in there. Pretty simple step, so we'll keep things more efficient. What I have on my brush now, I've just added a little bit of white into my lava orange and cotto red base mixture. This gives me a nice salmon tone. That's how I avoid going into the ultra orange direction. Highlighting red, a lot of people will add orange into it. A lot of people, if you go the white direction, just kind of making things look orange or pink, but mixing them together gives you this nice salmon tone, and for me at least, that's how I like to see it. It looks more red, I think, and it allows the other, the oranges to look more orange, etc. So, you can see just the tiny touches with my tiniest brush, slashing along, superficial scratches and dents, as always, underlining the, to produce kind of a blistered lip where the paint has been chipped away. Yeah, we're just going to be adding the final touches onto everything. Get all those little peaks in there, pulling everything with a fine-toothed comb. And yeah, we can be done on these reds. Move on to another portion of the model, so let's get it going. Let's go, buddy! So, I'm going to be working on the pelt and the squig. And I just wanted to share my progression here. Well, I suppose I go into a pure sanguine base. But I'm just talking about my mixtures in the previous steps, but why not, share some of it, because what I'm trying to accomplish here, I still want this to look red, but I don't want it to appear as the exact same red on the armor. So you see I'm mixing the cotto red base in with the sanguine base to create more of a brick red tone. I'll keep going like this, and then once I'm getting up there, let's start adding some Baron Dune into the mix. You see, now this gives me, more of a desaturated, slightly pinked out red, but only slightly. Now we can just keep moving up in the progression. That final sharp highlight, that can be a bigger jump. It doesn't need to blend so smoothly when you're just laying down sharp edge highlights. So that's what I've got on my menu. Don't forget this little guy, that for the sake of completion. Ah, yes, so beautiful. So that's what I'm going to be working through. Let's paint the pelt. Time for some wet blending. So first, just laying down a nice base coat. I got that sanguine base mixed in with some black. And let's jump up to, you know what? I want to risk it all. I'm going to go for that mid mixture, that sanguine base black and also a little bit of the Cowder red mixed in. Because I'm wet blending, I can get away with a little bit more of a stretch. So let's throw it down in place, wipe off the brush, drag some of the excess down. This is, it's going to establish some more of the general light source. There's a lot of texture to key into on this, but first I like to look at things and ignore the texture. Just think about the general shapes and how the object is waving, almost like squinting your eyes so the object becomes blurred. Just working at something from a very kind of vague general shape and then gradually refining it. Success, one of my favorite things. Now it's time to start sharpening the blade. I want to render some of these details, but again, you don't want to go maximum hardness right away. There's still some more gentle volumes that would be at play, so I'm just going to mainly be pushing some paint up to the top of each one of these pieces of scale, and that's the mixture that I just wet blended right into. That black sanguine base, Cowder red base. Are they base? Yes, they are both based. AF. All right, so I'm having fun. Let's keep laying this in place. Get that all wrapped up. And now just a little lighter and brighter. That same mixture, but if you recall the progression, I've got more the Cowder red base mixed in, covering much smaller areas. I'll want to, some of these scales are pretty large, so they'll still receive, kind of a flattening highlight across the top, but then, around the bottom, there's a bit of an edge. So I like to pull those out as well. But now it's starting to happen. I'm starting to break. This color is, it's filling in some blending as well as some sharper edge highlighting. So we're starting to get closer to the tip of the spear that we will be dancing upon. That is how you reach success and perfection. Dancing upon the spear. Yeah, I'll leave that in. But let me just keep chopping along. And, a lot of the same rules apply. This isn't done in one pass. You're still trying to go for a very saturated result. I mix these colors up on my palette, and there's a good distance between them. I lay a thin diluted layer over of that paint down, over the previous coat, and there's some transparency at play. So, as always, just doing this multiple coats, just getting the most and the best saturated representation of each color in my stepped progression. Let's go. Getting scaly. Now we're getting into the off-pink realm. I'm just kind of playing it like this is a squig hide, so it's a very nice squig color. It's good off-red compared to the red on the armor. You can see what I'm up to. You see what the tip of that brush is doing. There are again, there's that kind of strip of larger scales running down the middle of the pelt. So those are going to require a little bit more still of a broad application, but also some edging. Just playing with the build-up, with the saturation. Yeah, now we're picking out all the tiny dots and slashes, really leaning into the scaly texture. I want to have some. This model's just covered in textures, and that's fun. Like a variety of texture, it is its own form of contrast. There's a lot to see on this fella. A lot of topography. But yeah, just some very tiny dots and slashes for the most part. Just gently pencil things in. Yep. And right here, there's a little room for, kind of want to edge highlight that lower lip again, that kind of lower ridge of the scale, just like so. Not all the way down, but pull it around on the sides. Not running it around the bottom in an even ring. Still, getting that contrast in there. The shadow being cast. That's what I'm trying to replicate. It'll be highlighted, but not to the same level of brightness on that bottom facing. All right, let me keep chopping this up. All right, another couple steps. You know me, wash it down, highlight it up. Gotten to that final step. I've got my another mixture of paint and ink and just some regular old water. And yeah, push it into all those crevices, slide it around, let it do its thing. Make sure it's not hanging out high on top of anything. Those kind of flatter planes I was establishing, but honestly, I don't think I can really do much wrong with a wash on a surface this heavily textured, so dry, I say. All right, it's dry. Get in there with my very fine brush. Just bringing up that final, it's a pink. It's okay to paint with pink on orcs. I'm here to tell you that everything's fine. I've got that. I work with a mud palette, basically. It's like a 5-color mix at this point, but you've seen me bring it up all the way, right? But basically, I've got a mixture of Kato Red base, Sanguine base, and now some lovely Barren Dune. I'll be going in there, laying down just the finest dots that I can. And if you see me make a large dot on camera, I'll be fixing it off camera. Got a little bit of a wider line than I would have liked there, but we'll see how it sits among everything else. It might be just okay. There's a very back and forth nature to painting, so it might seem like I'm just going 1, 2, 3, but of course a little step back is, well, that's how dancing is done. So I'll commit to the dance of blades here, lay down the sharpness. But what about that squiggly beast atop his shoulder, I can hear you say? Well, the skin was brought up with the same colors I used on the pelt, just for a little color communication. So I thought I would target the eye. I've got a base coat of fiendish yellow laid in place. I'll start off by just wet blending a small amount of white to give us some dimension. Very nice. I felt the blend was so nice, I thought I would try it twice. Then on a second coat of wet blending to speed things along. You can always, it came out a little transparent. I'm using quite a thin amount of paint. Just want to increase the saturation, like so. There we go. Now we've got a good foundation. And now I'll come in for a little layering just to smooth things out. So just drop a small amount of fiendish yellow mixed with white. Well, I say layering. Feathered layers. I am feathering this up. Yeah, just ever so slightly. Make sure to ride as close to this dark line as I can. I can always reapply it, but the idea is to not make mistakes. You have to go back and cover up on a very defined line around the eye, but just gradually adding to the saturation. Overall, I want this eyeball to be very light. I don't want it to drop down to a deep shadow. I want it to look like a juicy organ, an exposed organ that the eyeball is. Now I've added just a small amount of black to that fiendish yellow, which gives me this kind of sickly green. Just rim that around the bottom of the eye, and again feather out that edge. Very nice. Let me add one more kick up. Let's keep brightening the lighter parts of the eye. I'm not going that hard on the depth of contrast, so I want to make sure that I lay down some extra saturation. Now we'll get that pupil in place, looking straight ahead. I'm going to start with some scarab green. Just begin in the middle, slowly work my way out, creating a circle. It's better than trying to draw a perfect circle. You can kind of slowly push the boundaries. I'm going to make this somewhat large. I mean, after all, it's a targeter squig. They're chosen for a very specific battlefield role. I'll start pulling some Templegate teal into play. Just want to make sure this color is resting more towards the bottom of the eye, giving it a gem-like effect. And yeah, the reason I chose scarab green is to give this a defined outline. Lay it in just like so. And the pie slicing continues, just following along on that crescent shape. This time I have a little talisman teal loaded up. Just trying to get that as close to that bottom dark edge of the eye as I can. Just gently sweeping. Don't want to overdo it and ruffle the paint as it's drying, so I may be a little impatient. I want this to look good right away. But take your time, I say to myself. And just one more. We've got talisman teal with a little bit of white added into it. Wow, look at that little puppy dog eye he's got. Next up, I'm going to drag a pupil in place. We'll go for the vertical slit approach. Just drawing a very thin line. It'd come off the brush. It's got such a tiny amount of paint on it. Go back in for another dip. Sort of widen things out once I have that midline established. Very nice. Let's take some of that talisman teal now and try to outline a little eyeball. Hold my breath in between brush strokes. There we go. Whoa, a little rough. Let me do the other side. It's very tiny. You may have to repeat this, but don't get discouraged. Now to add a little dimension to the pupil, mixed up a light gray, just combining black and white. Drop that in there. It's barely noticeable. Just push it up a little bit further, a little bit more white. Yes. Yes. Now we're cooking with gas. All right. Talisman teal plus white again. I like that. I'd also like to go in with a little fiendish yellow now. You can always work on both sides of the line when you're freehanding. You know, this the circle of the eye doesn't look perfect, but look at that. I can just take very small amounts of paint. Be very patient here. Remind yourself that what you're doing takes seconds of time. Nice and sharp. All right, let's push. Let's get that talisman teal and white mixture again. All right. Sorry for the absence of words. This is a very tight and detailed step. Try to slice things in here just right. All right. Gorgeous eyeball. I can see for miles and miles. I'd like to also go back in with some fiendish yellow and white. sharpen around the upper area with the appropriate color. Probably drag this around the pupil a little bit as well. Or rather the retina. Gotta remember my parts of the eyeball. Yeah. Gives it a little bit more dimension, a little more realistic this way. Just keep brightening it up. All right. Now we'll go in, just grab some pure white, drop some reflective gleams of light in here. All right. I dig it.
And there it is. Much wog, very Daka. Like I said, I was carrying this piece with me for a long time, and it feels very nice to have it done. But as challenging as that was, as it can be, to have a longer lasting drawn out project, it feels that much better when you get it done. So don't be intimidated by the amount of work. This model, this piece, brings a couple milestones into view for me. When I work on orcs, it always connects me to the past, but this particular color scheme is taken from the colors that I painted on my first orc army when I was just a wee bitty lad, like 8 or 9 years old. I've gotten a little bit better since then. And also this piece is part of a series of escalating dioramas. I was starting with, I wanted to create more scenic pieces as I was going through this last kind of phase of creation, and every piece just got a little bit larger, and finally I came to this one of the largest I've done in a while. So what comes after that? An even bigger piece. We'll see. I think I'll give myself some shorter range projects for the time being, some small victories to chew upon before I get to the next great work. But as always, thank you for your support on Patreon, making all this possible. I'm happy to hear from you in the comment section down below. And until we meet again down that chromatic road, remain unchained.